Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today we're going to be painting November Moon, and I'm going to be sipping on a little Chardonnay. And if you do enjoy this video, I encourage you to like and subscribe to my channel, and to also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for the materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'll be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, ultramarine blue, fire red, fluorescent orange, burnt umber, which I'll call brown, and I have Mars black. And of course you can switch up those colors a little bit if you'd like, but that's what I'm going to be using. I have two tools today. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush, and I have a number 4 round brush, and I will refer to these as small and large as we go through the painting process. Of course you could switch those up too if you'd like to. If you're painting along with me, you're probably going to want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, I will be supplying you with a couple of additional resources that can help you through your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the paint and the brushes and all that good stuff. So that's there for you. But there's also a link in the description where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we are painting the first layer of our sky. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush, and the colors that I'm using are blue, red, orange, and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with my moon, and then I'm going to do, or my first layer of my moon, and then I'm going to do my first layer of the sky. But I want to stop it at a certain height on the canvas. I don't want to go too far down. So I'm going to just put a little bit of blue and red on my brush right now to show to give myself almost like a horizon line where I can stop my sky. So I'm going to have mine a little bit lower than the halfway mark. So if this is about your halfway mark, I'd go a little bit lower than that. Make yourself a little bit of a mark. You can use your brush or anything you have handy as a measuring tool and come over to the other side and make yourself a mark at about the same level. This doesn't have to be a perfect line right now, just for the record. Just kind of give yourself a little bit of a horizon line so you don't go past that. And then what I'm going to do is I am just going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, and I'm going to pick up some white paint. This is going to start the first layer of my moon. So if your moon is not 100% white at this point, don't worry, this will add a nice undertone to it. I'm going to have mine to the right of my center, and it's going to be about halfway in the middle of this area here. So if I'm going to go a little bit to the right of my center of my canvas, I'm going to make mine probably the size, I don't know, of like a baseball maybe. And if you feel like that's too colorful, you can always just wipe your brush off on your paper towel, pick up a little bit more white. But just know we are going to be doing a second layer on this sky and the moon. So if it is a little bit darker than you want it to be, don't worry about it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start picking up in an alternating fashion my blue, my red, and my orange, and I'm going to finish the sky with a circular brush stroke. So I'm going to start near my moon. So I'm going to pick up maybe a little bit of blue. I did not wash my brush, so I am going to have evidence of the white on there as well. And I want to bump into the edge of the moon. So that way it's going to have a nice transition as I do the other layers to it. I just picked up a little bit of red, and I'm going to start going away from that moon. And again, you can certainly have this as light or as dark as you want, but I am just going to I'm not using a whole lot of paint while I am around the moon. As I get into the rest of the sky, I might use a little bit more paint, but right now I'm really just trying to get a gentle transition from the edge of the moon into the sky itself. And once I've accomplished that, you can always just come back and kind of dust that brush around the edges. But once I've accomplished a meeting point between the moon and the sky, now I just kind of go hog wild. So maybe I'm just going to pick up a little bit of red in through here, put in some red areas, pick up some blue. If you can get the bottom of the sky pretty dark, the bottom and the top of the sky, that's going to look great. Naturally, around the moon would be the lightest, but if yours doesn't end up the lightest there at the moment, don't worry, because we've got that second layer to do. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of my orange, and again, I'm just alternating my colors. So one time I'm going to pick up blue, the next time I'm going to pick up red, then I'll pick up orange, then blue, then red, then orange, and maybe sometimes I pick up two colors at once. If I want some really dark areas, I can pick up my blue and my red at the same time, and now I've got a really dark color. So you can certainly kind of play with these colors. If you find that as you're doing this, everything seems to be blending together and it's all looking like it's one mushed color, that just means that you have too much paint on your brush and you probably want to wash your brush and just start over. So when we're doing a step like this and not washing our brush, that can very easily happen. So if that happens to you and you're going along and just everything seems like it's blending together and you're not getting these seemingly separate color sections as I am, it's just indicating that you have too much paint on your brush is overloaded and you're not able to transition from one color to the next. So I would just wash and dry your brush. And again, sometimes I'm picking up two colors. I just picked up blue and red at the same time. So I've got this nice dark area. I'll take you back to first grade art class where they taught you that red and blue makes purple if you mix them together. So if you use both of those colors together, you're going to get a really nice deep dark purple type effect. And then I'm just going to kind of cruise through and finish up this sky, and then we're going to use the same brush for the next step. But as you're finishing this up, don't worry if the paint brush strokes are scratchy looking or they're not smooth, because we will smooth them out on the second step to this. So don't worry if they're not perfect right now. This is intended to just be our first layer of the sky. It's not meant to look perfect. It's just really meant to give us a starting point for how we want this sky to look by the time we're done. And I think that looks pretty good to me right now. So I am going to wash and dry this large brush. Get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are doing the first layer on our water. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. I'm going to be using the same colors that I used in my sky, which are white, blue, orange, and red. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to put a horizon line, and then I'm going to start the reflection from the moon. I'm going to have it directly under my moon, and then it's going to come over at an angle. I'm only going to have my water go about halfway in this vacant space here. So the other half is going to be land, and I don't need it to be straight across. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put maybe a little bit of white and a touch of blue on my brush, so more white than blue. I'm going to come up maybe about halfway between here, and then just kind of give myself a really just carefree, uneven kind of line. And you can make yours however you want. This is just, the way I'm seeing it in my little head. And then I'm going to pick up some more white, And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to give myself a white horizon line. I am going to alter the colors after they're on here, but I just really want to get it kind of a clean line in place first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a mark on the right hand side in my sky, and then I'm going to use my brush as a measuring tool and come over to the other side and make myself another mark. This should theoretically be pretty similar to the first marks that you made, but it shifts a little sometimes when you're painting, so if you want to make the markers, that helps. And then I'm just going to kind of go quickly across like this. I like to keep my eye on the prize, which is the other marker. I need to reload my brush because I'm running out of paint here. And again, this does not have to be perfect because we will be doing a second layer to it, but this just kind of gets the water in motion, I guess, and gets you kind of a cleaner line. You want to make sure it's all in the sky. And then I'm going to reload my brush with white, and I'm going to get my moon reflection started here. So I'm starting underneath my moon. I'm going pretty wide, at least as wide as the moon. And then I'm going to just bring out this lighter area, which I know might be a little tough to detect white on white, but it's probably wet enough for you to see what I'm doing here. I'm going left to right. I want my water to kind of look like it's on the ripply side. So now I'm just picking up blue, and I'm going to try and go in a similar color pattern to whatever is above it in the sky. So I've got lots of blue here, so I'm going to just bring in some blue in through here. I see that there's a little bit of reddish orange along the edge of the moon there, so maybe I just put a little bit of that in through here. Pick up some orange, and again, this doesn't have to be perfect. This is just really our first go at the water. We are going to do a second layer on it, but this again just kind of starts the process. It's really dark up there, so I just put some red and blue on my brush. And again, I'm going for more of a rippled kind of look to my water, so it does not have to be exactly a mirror image of that sky. You're really just looking for similar color patterns or a transition of the color. If it's, you know, I've got a little bit of blue next to the moon. So you're trying to make it believable to the person who is looking at it that this is in fact a reflection of what's happening in that sky. But again, it doesn't have to be a mirror image. So I'm just going about this. I see some blue in through here, some purpley kind of red and blue in through here, so I just put a little bit of that on my brush. And again, I'm not washing my brush as I go through this process. And if you don't paint the water 100%, if you have little pieces of your canvas showing through at this point, that's okay, because again, we're going to have another layer on this that will help to get those colors to, or get you to finish painting it. But the reason I'm doing 2 layers is I don't want to over blend it. So I'm going about this in kind of a cautionary way, just to get my first layer on here. And when I go to do that second layer, it will add more dramatic pops of those colors. And same thing when I go to do the sky. So I am going to use the same brush for the next step, but I'm going to wash it and dry it. So once you've got the first layer of your water on here, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're doing the first layer of our land. I'm gonna be using my large bristle brush, and I'm gonna be using brown, red, and blue. And how I'm gonna do this is I'm going to be painting it with a whole bunch of dots. So I'm going to be alternating my colors on my brush. So I went brown, then blue, then red, and I'm going to overlap them onto each other so I get an assortment of colors. I know that this is going to turn out to be darker when it dries. So if it's a little bit too light or see-through right now, don't worry about it. And plus it's just the first layer. So I want there to be some natural tones in there. That's why I'm using some brown. And I want to make sure if my original outline that I did for the land is evident, that I cover that. So I'm just kind of dotting away. I can have a messy top edge to my land. That's going to make it look more natural. So how I'm doing this, again, is just blue, brown, and red. And this is a, you know, an abstract kind of landscape that we're doing, so this does not have to be anything realistic. Just enjoy the process, and if you want yours to be more red or more blue or more brown, just go for it. It's all about having a lot of fun throughout this process and enjoying what happens on our canvas. So, you know, if you want that purpley look, use the blue and the red at the same time. And then we are going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your land all nice and covered here, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are doing the second layer of our sky, which is gonna finish it. We are gonna use the large brush, and we're gonna use the same colors that we did the first time, which is white, orange, red, and blue. And I do want to forewarn you that before you go on to this step, you want to make sure your sky is nice and dry. So, you know, you can either take an extra long break if you want to, or you could sit here and blow on it. Or you can just take out a blow dryer if you need to and blow dry it. So whatever you've got to do, maybe yours is already dry by now, but because we are putting a second layer on top of a layer that we just did, that first layer is pretty fragile, so you want to make sure that you have it nice and dry. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start at my moon. I'm going to go much slower this time than I did the first time because I'm really looking to develop some details on it, and I'm going to work my way away from the moon. So the moon, I'm going to have my edges are going to be a little bit more identified. I want my moon to look three-dimensional, so I'm going to have it lighter in the middle. It's going to go a little bit darker on the edges, and then I'm going to put almost like a darker ring around the outside, so I can have clouds wisping by and all that good stuff. And then as I work my way through the rest of the sky, I'm really going to be doing the same thing that I did the first time to, in essence, kind of give it a smooth type of look, but I'm not going to be concerned if I put red on top of red or orange on top of orange. You can certainly put the orange on top of the blue or the purple on top of the red. Whatever you're feeling is totally fine, and you'll see how quickly it becomes much more smooth looking. So when I start with my moon, I'm going to start with very little paint on my brush, so not much at all, and I'm just starting with some white. I'm going to get that center into play with a little bit of my white paint, and I'm not using much, so I have a lot of control over what's happening. So if you use a ton of paint on your brush, it really will make for a difficult time to control it. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of red and blue because I want this to be on the more purpley side, with a little bit of my white, and I'm going to start to get the exterior of my moon in place. This is going to, or the outside part of the moon. This is going to make it start to look three-dimensional. I'm picking up just a little bit more white so I can make sure that this center area blends with that darker area that I'm putting along the exterior of it. So now that I've got that nicely blended, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit more of my, I think I want to touch more red actually. Let's make this a little bit redder along the edges. The November moons can come in all different colors. Kind of, October has different colored moons too, but of course, a lot of this painting is out of my imagination. So maybe yours ends up being a blue moon or a purple moon or a gray moon. Well, we're not using gray, so maybe it won't end up that way, but you can certainly, if yours doesn't turn out the same color as mine, or you know, even close, don't worry about it, because there's all different colored moons. But I wanted mine a little bit redder, so I just added a little bit more of that red to my brush. That's looking pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm not washing my brush. I'm just going to pick up a little bit more of the blue and the red. So what's going to happen, because I didn't wash my brush and I didn't pick up white, is I'm going to get it a little bit darker than my actual moon itself. So I can almost get this, I would say like a a shadowy area in the sky, which is not the correct terminology, but just something a little bit deeper and darker next to it, so that way it pops out of my canvas a little bit more. So it really can be any tone, just as long as it's a little bit darker than the actual moon itself. And you can continue to adjust it. I just put a little bit more white on my brush. I just almost want to crisp up the edges of that moon, where it hits the sky. So by putting this darker, almost little bit of a shell around it, again, not the correct terminology, it's helping to get that moon to pop right out. And your moon doesn't have to be perfectly circle, because we're going to be adding some clouds kind of floating by. So those are going to help to make any edges that are not perfect, that will help to disguise them. So you can certainly just kind of finagle with this and make it whatever, you know, intensity of a lightness or darkness around the edges. And then I'm just going to start to soften it into the sky. Now around the moon in the sky, that's going to be where it's going to be the most glowy, where it's going to cast kind of a light, almost smoky, cloudy look on whatever the sky is next to it. So if you want there to have almost like this atmospheric dimension to the neighboring sky, that's where you'd want to have the lightest like clouds floating by. So I am going to continue to add some darker areas in here, but just if you do have some lighter areas, that's awesome. And again, I'm going much slower than I did on my first go around. I think I'm gonna maybe put a little cloud coming right in front of my moon, something like this. And again, just have fun with the edges of your moon. If you don't want them to be as crisp as mine, you can always just soften them up a little bit by using a little bit of the remnants on your brush with a little bit of white, and getting these edges. Of course, you saw that I got it to be kind of crisp around that edge, but now what I'm doing is I'm just adding these little like floaty clouds on top of some of those edges, and it's really helping to add some great dimension to it and some really cool effects, some nice nighttime effects. Maybe this is where all the creatures in the night start to make their noise when they see these clouds drifting by the moon. So you just have fun with it. Use your imagination as you're creating it, but obviously I'm going the slowest while I am right around the moon, so that way I can get the effect that I want there. And then when I start going towards the rest of the sky, you'll find that I go a little bit faster and just start, no pun intended, but floating around the sky, getting all those clouds whatever way I want them to be. I might come back and touch this a little bit in a minute, but I think I'm going to start working on the rest of the sky so I can see how that develops, and then if I do want to move and do anything else to the moon, I'll have a better picture of how the rest of the sky looks. And as I get towards this water, it's okay if you bump into your water a little bit, because you're going to be doing a second layer on that too. But you can certainly just have fun with this second layer. You're going to notice as soon as you start doing the same circular motion on top of your first layer, how smooth it naturally just becomes. And it just, when you add these layers on top of each other, they help to work each other together and make it look really nice and soft and natural, and you can build these layers upon layers. It makes it look really nice and natural, because that's what the sky is. The sky is not a two-dimensional object. It has layers of colors and atmosphere and clouds, and you know, maybe you put some stars in your sky. Whatever you're feeling is totally fine. And I'm just kind of going about adding these colors as I want to. I'm really not using a ton of paint on my brush, but I am consciously, as I'm getting towards an area, I'm like, do I want that lighter or darker? Right now, actually, I feel like I have too much paint on my brush to get this to to work together. So I just wiped my brush off on my paper towel. And again, you might find that you want yours with more drama in it. So maybe you have way more darkness to your sky, or more lightness, or maybe you really like the purpley type look, so you create a lot of your sky with that purple, or the orange. Maybe you really are digging the pops of the orange that creates. So just feel free to have fun with this. This might end up looking, you know, I don't know, maybe like, I don't know, a cold November night. I don't know. That's what I'm picturing it to be. It's like, it's on the cusp of being a winter. It hasn't quite maybe snowed for the first time yet. And that sky is super cold, but there's still those hints of warmth with those, the red in the clouds, or the orange in the clouds. So, you know, just you imagine it whatever way that you want to imagine it. I love this fluorescent orange when I start putting it on top of other colors, because it adds so much life to it. So sometimes I digress, sorry. When I get to these colors, it's like, ooh, I really like that color. So you just have fun as you're doing this. I think I'm gonna have a little bit darker down in this corner. And again, you could certainly use more white too. If you wanted there to be lighter clouds floating by, feel free to add little pops of these clouds going by wherever you want them to be. I've got this last little area here to finish up, and you might want to add another layer onto your sky. You feel it out, let it dry. If you want another layer and you want more softness to it, one more layer would definitely do the trick on that. But I think this is looking pretty good for me, so I think I'm gonna call it on mine. That looks pretty. I think it's tough to stop, I tell you. I think I'm just gonna maybe add a little bit into this area just to soften up this bottom edge of my moon. And then we are gonna use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your second layer of your sky, you've got your light clouds just drifting by, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so talk about a November sky. This is my view out my window right now as I'm painting the November sky painting. So I gain inspiration from everywhere. Everybody always asks me where my paintings come from, and well, here's a great example. This is my sky out my studio. Okay, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are finishing our water. So I'm going to use my big brush, and I'm in essence going to do the same thing that I did the first time, only I'm going to use less paint. How I'm going to do this again is I'm going to be starting with my same reflection area of the moon, and then just working my way out. And as you can see, when I did that second layer of my sky, my colors shifted a little bit, but that's what I intended to do. So now they're just going to overlap like they did on the sky. So I'm going to start with a white paint, and I'm going to put kind of another layer of wet white paint in that same area. So that way I can almost pull it out into the neighboring areas a little bit. And I'm just using a left to right brush stroke, so that way it emulates ripples going into the water. And then you can either work from out to in or in to out, whatever works best for you. But I'm going to start incorporating some of those colors on the side of my moon, down along the side of the reflection. So I'm seeing some blue and some light orange kind of color. So I didn't wash my brush. I really just want to pull these colors into that wet white paint to make it look like they're rippling together, I guess. So I don't necessarily need that white paint to just be a solid white line going down the center. It actually will pop out more the higher the contrast is with the colors that are sitting next to it. So if you're finding that it's just merging into outline areas, it probably means that you need to add more contrast to the color next to it. So make it lighter, or excuse me, make it darker next to it so you can actually see that white will pop out even more. So I just added some red and blue to my brush to get some of these other tones in through here. I'm going to have it really pretty dark as it goes towards those exteriors, because that's what I'm seeing in the painting. So again, same colors as the sky, same colors as you did the first layer, which is the white, the red, the blue, and the orange. And I'm making my reflection a little bit more narrow as it gets farther away from the moon itself, because that to me is what it would naturally do. I'm going to get some red and blue, get some purple-ish type color going in through here. The only thing when you get to that horizon line is you don't want to lose your horizon line. So make sure that whatever you do, you can tell the difference between the sky and your water. Otherwise, you'll lose part of that optical illusion. So if it ends up being too close in color, you might have a difficult time seeing which is which. So even if you have to just kind of come back and put a light line up at the top, that would help to make those two objects look different from one another. And again, I'm just kind of using a left to right brush stroke. I see a lot of blue up here, so I'm going to pull a little bit more blue up and through there. And I'm trying to go, you know, in a similar color pattern to what's up above, but it doesn't have to be a mirror image. You just want something similar. I've got some orange over here on this side, so I'll definitely put some orange in through there. And again, if your colors end up feeling like they're a little bit too muddled, either wash and dry your brush or wipe it off on your paper towel. So whatever you need to do to get it in the correct color that you want it. And again, I'm just kind of overlapping these colors. I see a lot of the dark blue here, or the dark purple, so red and blue, making sure I've got that represented in through here. And then let's see, what are we going to do for the next step? We are going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this water all nice and finished, I think I want a little bit more of my orange in through here just to pop some vibrant tones next to that white. And then, so once you get done your water, you're gonna put this large brush away, take out your small brush. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And you can get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are doing the first layer of our tree trunks and branches with our small brush and black paint. So how I'm going to do this, these are imaginary trees for me. You can create your own style of tree that you'd like, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some pretty thick trunks. I think I'm going to have 3 trees. I'm going to have a really tall one up and through here, kind of a medium height one over here, and then a shorter one in through here. So I am going to use a little bit of my tree knowledge, which would be at the bottom of every trunk. That's probably the widest part of the tree, and then it gets more narrow as it goes up. So I'm going to be using my small brush with black paint. If I do still have wet paint on the rest of my canvas, I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to paint it through. The black will overpower any other color. Plus, we're going to be doing another layer of paint on top of this black. So I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to have maybe one over in through here. I'm going to start a little bit into my land. This is going to be maybe 1.5 inches wide at the bottom. I'm really not terribly concerned what happens at the bottom because we're going to be putting grass and stuff down there. And then let's see, I'm going to have maybe my main trunk coming up in through here. And of course, you can certainly have your trees shaped however you want them to be. This is your tree. You can have them, you know, as exactly as mine, or you can manipulate them into whatever way that you want. Don't worry about the tips of your branches because we're going to be putting leaves on those in a little bit. And if I like to, on these type of paintings, when it's kind of abstract like this, I like to not dilute my horizon line. I like you to be able to see it. So if I'm branching or forking off, I like to do it either before or after that horizon line. So that way you get that extra bit of detail in the painting. If you do it right on the horizon line, you kind of lose a little bit of that oomph that you might get from the effect of it. But that's just me. You can certainly have fun and put yours wherever you want. I am using a lot of paint on my little brush, and I know that branches can cross over one another, so I am definitely having fun with how they're interacting with each other. And I know I'm going to have another little tree right in through here, so I don't want this to go too far off into the right hand side. But again, you can certainly have fun and make yours whatever way you want. I am going to have a couple little almost pom-pom parts of my leaves up in through this top area, so you can bring those branches up as high as you want. And then on this one, I think I'm going to have it maybe I was going to say about half the distance between my moon and my tree, but I think I might go a little bit closer to my tree. So something like this. This one for me is going to be a little bit smaller because I'm only going to have it come up about this high, but it still holds that truth of being just a touch wider at the base. Oops, I just dropped a big glob of black paint. That's all right. Nothing my finger can't fix. And then I think this one I'll have coming over almost underneath that moon, maybe somewhere in through here. And then I'll have maybe another, I just went on my horizon line, something I told you I don't typically do. I wasn't even paying attention. I just wanted my branch to be there. And then maybe I'll have another one coming in through here. But that's all right. Who's to know I didn't want to do that? Only you guys know that. And then I'm just going to kind of, maybe I'll make a couple little ones up here. And maybe one in through here. And again, I know I'm going to have my pom-pom leaves up on the top, so I'm not even really concerned about what the ends of those branches look like. And then I'm going to have one over here. This one I think I'm going to have closer to the edge of my land, maybe somewhere in through here, and maybe I'll have it coming up like this. I think I'll have this one branching out above my horizon line, if I remember to do it correctly. Sometimes my brush just gets away from me and I can't control what it's doing. It just wants to do whatever it wants to do. And then maybe this one will have a cool one going over here, and maybe it'll drop back over the horizon line, something like that. So again, just have fun, enjoy the process. Put your wild leaves or your wild branches wherever you want them to be. And just know that you're going to, if you do something that you don't like, don't worry about it, because you'll be able to hide it with some strategically placed leaves in a little bit. And maybe I'll have this one going all the way over to the edge of the canvas. And maybe I'll have another one coming up here. And again, just have fun. So we are going to be switching brushes to our large brush. So once you've got your trees in place and have as many branches on here as you want, you can put this small brush away in your water cup or wherever you'd like. Take out your large brush and get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the first layer of the leaves on our trees. I'm going to be using my large brush. I'm going to be using black paint only. So how I'm going to do this, I don't use a lot of paint. Really what I'm doing is I'm taking my brush and just kind of pushing it into a thin spot of my black paint. This way my brush isn't overloaded and I can really tell it where to go, and it's not going to take too long to dry. I'm going to be applying it with a dotting or a stippling type technique. I don't want these to be round trees. I want them to just have almost like pockets or puffy little sections of leaves. So I'm going to be strategic as to where I place them. Obviously, I want leaves on the ends of my branches, but they can also grow a little bit wider. So I'm going to just start down here, and I'm going to just use the corner of my brush to get these little sections in. You might want larger sections or smaller sections, whatever works for you is totally fine. But when you're doing these littler areas, you can just use the corner of your brush. And then when you get to the bigger areas, you can put leaves where you don't have branches if you want. You can put them really wherever you feel that you want to have a fuller section to the tree. So I want to be able to see some of my branches through there. So I am just strategically placing some leaves, crossing over those branches, leaving them showing a little bit. So have fun with this. Don't feel like you have to dot the entire thing. I like my edges to be messy, so every now and again I'm going to just poke out a little spot. I like them to be uneven but still kind of balanced with one another. So I'm not going to have one huge thing up here and then nothing all the rest of the tree. I am going to still make it feel like the tree's not going to fall over, like it has a good balance of leaves throughout it. But I do want to see, you know, some fullness to it and some of these spots with the branches showing through. So I just have fun and make sure that I feel like I've got enough on there and that it's not too systematic. I really dig the wild side of Mother Nature. So when I'm doing any of these kind of things, to me, the wilder the better. So as I'm doing these, that's really what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, don't be too systematic. Don't make them all look like pom-poms. You know, go outside of the branch box a little bit. So have some drooping down a little bit. So I really just have fun and make sure that they've got some character to it, you know? So this to me feels pretty good. I don't want it to encroach on that space too much. So I'm going to go ahead and start this one over here. I got a little area coming off of that one, and I keep turning my brush so I don't have the same exact type of dot every time that I hit my canvas. So I keep turning my brush so I've got some fluffier areas or some more solid areas, and you know, that just helps to ensure that it's not too uniform looking for me. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put some over here, make sure I tell the story that that branch over there has some on it as well. Maybe put some coming out here. And again, if you did something that you didn't like on your tree trunk or on your sky, this is a great time to disguise it with some strategically placed leaves, and I think that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to be using the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your leaves on your tree, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing the ground. So this is going to include shadows for our trees and then a nice little layer of grass, I guess, or some kind of ground covering. So I'm going to use my large brush. I'm going to be using black, brown, orange, and white to accomplish this. First thing I'm going to do is put my shadows behind my trees. So I'm going to use a very little bit of brown and black on my brush at the same time. And the only trick here is your shadow has to come in the same direction that the light source would be casting it. So if you were to draw a line from the center of your light source to the bottom of your object and just keep going, that's going to give you the correct direction. I need a little more black so you can see it. The correct direction for your shadow. And really, you're just darkening the surface that the shadow is on. So they don't all have to be black per se, but if your ground is really dark, you might want to use a little bit of black. So again, I'm going to use my tool here, which is my light source. Draw a diagonal line down to the bottom of your object, and that is the direction your shadow should be coming. And I'm hardly using any paint on my brush because I don't want this to be a really thick kind of shadow. I just want it to be evident. So I'm going to do the same thing from here, my imaginary line to this one, and then I just keep going. So here's my line, and from the bottom of my object like this, and then I'm just going to pull it out in that direction. Now that I have my shadows of my trees, what I'm gonna do, if you have a ton of paint on your brush, just a ton of black paint, just kind of wiggle it into your paper towel, because you can still use a little bit of that black, and I'm gonna load it with some brown and some orange. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start kind of dotting a second layer onto my ground. This is gonna help to keep some of the original tones underneath it, but add that almost a textural kind of look to it. And if you want yours darker, you can certainly add more blue or more red or whatever you'd like to do, but I want mine to look kind of dirty, like it's the ground. I will also, in a second, once I've got this little bit of a second layer on here, I'm gonna dot this lightly on top of my shadow to make the shadow look like it's got some grass on it too. So I'm not pushing hard. I'm just gonna kind of add some little bit of speckly dots on top of my shadow. And as it dries, you're still gonna be able to see that shadow is evident. So this is just adding more dimension to it. I wanna lighten the top of my land, so that's where my white is gonna come into play. So now I just add a little bit of orange and white, and this is gonna add the highlight from the moon. I think I'm gonna make this center area the lightest to tell the same story that is my light source. So I'm gonna add a little bit more white and orange to this center area. And again, if you wanted to add some red or blue to your ground, feel free to do so. It is totally up to you however you want this to be interpreted. And then I'm just gonna make sure that I have a little bit of this highlight at the edge of my land, so you can make sure that everybody understands that this textural area down at the bottom is in fact the land, and it looks different than the water itself. And I'm just kind of using the little dots of my brush, and that is all I'm gonna do for my land. We are going to be switching brushes to our small brush, so after you've got your texture on your land, you can put this large brush away somewhere, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are adding the highlights to our tree trunks and our branches. So I'm gonna use my small brush. The colors I'm using are brown, orange, and white. And how I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna start on each tree with a little bit of brown as almost the bark color, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of a highlight on the branches and the trunk on the side of the moon. So I'll start with this little one so we can kind of see how it's gonna work. I've got brown on my brush, and you can, the upper branches are not as important as the main trunk itself, but it depends on how big yours are. So right now I'm just adding a little bit of brown just to the main body of the trunk. The brown is going to be see-through, so when it dries, it is going to show that black underneath. So don't be alarmed if it's a little bit light for you while it's wet. It will dry a little bit darker, but this is just giving us that dimensional element to make sure that it looks like bark and it's not just two-dimensional. So now that I've got brown on there, you can or you don't have to wipe your brush off on your paper towel. Wherever your comfort zone is fine. So I'm putting orange and white on my brush at the same time, and I'm really just going to highlight the right hand side of these branches. And because I have both colors on my brush at the same time, I'm going to get some orange spots and I'm going to get some white spots. So it provides me with a great assortment of these highlighted tones. And if you really want it to pop, you can put that orange color almost outside of the dark part of the tree, and that's going to show some tremendous contrast, and it will really make it stand out even more. So if you're going about it and you're like, it's just not popping enough for me, then put that color outside of the tree, almost just on the little exterior of it, because the black underneath will make it look darker. So if you want it to really stand out and pop, you might have to put it a little bit on the outside of the tree trunk itself, but just along the edge. It doesn't have to be, you know, far away from it or anything. And then I'm just going to go right on to the next tree. So I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up some brown paint and I'm putting it on the side of the moon. So sometimes when you get into the branches themselves, it might get a little bit confusing because they might be going in all different kinds of ways. But if you can, you know, just look at your moon and know that it's over there, usually just by keeping your eye on it, it will help you to understand where your highlights would naturally go. And again, up in these little ones up in the tree, you're not really going to see them as much, so, or they're not going to be as noteworthy, I guess. So feel free to make them as subtle or as bright as you want. So as I get down in through here, I'm just going to kind of cruise along with this bright color on the side of the moon. Can't even see that, so that means I need some more white paint. And again, if you can't see it, that means you need more contrast. So it needs to either be lighter or darker than whatever it's next to. So I definitely want you to be able to see this. I want this to be a really neat effect on the painting itself. So if I can't see it, then that means you can't see it. So I'm just going to kind of keep adjusting. And again, right now I just have orange and white on my brush and I'm just skipping along. So sometimes I'm going to have a spot that has more on it. Sometimes I'm going to have a spot that has less on it. Maybe as I'm going down that one particular area in the tree, maybe it skips a spot. That's okay. That's totally going to happen in nature because these branches could be bumpy, they could have all kinds of stuff on them that are preventing, you know, that highlight to be shown, or maybe there's a shadow from one of the neighboring leaves or something. So just have fun with where you place them. We've got that last tree over there, so I'm just wiping my brush off on my paper towel. I'm going to start back with that brown, and now all of my highlights are going to be on the left because my moon is on the left. So I'm just adding some brown paint over to predominantly the left side of the tree. And if you go too far and you feel like, you know, oh no, I just put too much orange or too much white on the wrong side of the tree, just give it a minute and paint it over with black. The black can overpower anything, but it needs to be, you know, if you've used a lot of white and you want to go over it, you'll have to let it dry first. So now I'm just putting orange and white on my brush to get this bright highlight over here on the left hand side. And I'm not even terribly concerned about it being perfect. I want it to be bumpy. I want it to look like, you know, it's part of bark, or, you know, my fun imaginative tree. It can have as much punch or as little punch as you want it to be. It's all up to you and your visual preference. I just went through some wet black, which I'm totally okay with, on my tree. I just kind of wiped my brush off on my paper towel and just went to the next branch. If you have little gray spots that happen, awesome. It all works out. And then we are going to be switching brushes to our large brush. So once you've got this highlight on your trees, you can wash or put your small brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are finishing the leaves on our trees. I'm gonna be using my large brush and I'm gonna be using orange and white. So I'm gonna be in essence doing a similar thought process to what I did on the tree trunks, only I don't need to use brown this time because there's no bark to contend with. I'm gonna be putting my highlight predominantly on the side where the moon is. So at all times, I'm gonna have a little bit of orange and a little bit of white on my brush. So a little bit of orange and a little bit of white. And I'm starting out slow. so that way I don't overload my tree with these highlights. If you want yours to be uber bright, feel free to do so, but I'm going to start out slow and work my way towards the vibrancy, intensity that I want. So I have orange and white on my brush, and I'm lightly tapping to hit the edges by the moon. And realistically, the leaves or the trees closest to the moon would naturally be the brightest. So if you start there, that helps you to understand if you're too light or too dark. And if you're too dark, you can always lighten up, but it's tough to go the opposite direction. So I've got a pretty good color on my brush right now. It seems to be the way that I want it to be. As I'm doing this, I am going kind of in between. I'm really looking to have the brightness on the edge of the leaves by the moon. So that's why I'm not really focusing on having a lot in the center of my bunch of leaves too bright, but I can do these little in-between spots because that's on the other side of the tree. So going slow, just adding them to the edge where I think the moon would illuminate or put some glow to them. And it doesn't have to be systematic or the same on every single branch. I still haven't reloaded my brush, and as I'm going towards the edge of my canvas, I'm in essence kind of running out of paint, which is great because there's a lesser quantity on my brush, which is making it more subtle along as it gets farther away from the moon. And again, you can have yours as intense or as subtle as you want, but I really want it to kind of read as these beautiful highlights that are being, it's being illuminated by that November moon glow. And I think I'm going to add a touch as I get, this is really far away from the moon in my opinion. I'm going to add more orange to my brush and less white. I didn't wash it, so I'll still have some of that white on there, but I added a little bit more orange so that way it gets a little bit darker as it comes over this side. And again, wherever you think that moon would illuminate or cast a bright highlight on these leaves, that's where you're going to put it. But I'm just using the bit of the tip of my brush. I'm not going any further on in intensity. You can go past the black a little bit if you want that orange to be more orange or the white to be more white. If it's sitting on top of the black, it will be a little bit darker. And then even in through here, I'm just kind of adding these bits of highlight wherever I think it might happen on that side where the moon is, and on the other side of the tree, because I feel like we're on this side of the tree. And you just keep going until you feel like you've got enough of these little bursts of moon glow on your beautiful tree. And then once you feel like you've got enough of this fun, exciting life that we're just adding to our trees, you can we're going to use our tiny brush. We have one itty bitty step to go, and it's going to be with your small brush. So yeah, this looks good. So once you've got this all done, you can put this big brush away. Gosh, you can always tell when I'm starting to have fun. I always have fun in a painting, but you can always tell when I get to the end, it's like, yeah, I'm almost done. I got these really cool little effects that I'm doing. So when I get this way, bear with me. I am going to finish at some point, but right now I'm just fiddling and I'm having some fun. So you just have to deal with it for a second here. And then when you're all done, you can get ready for the next step with your little brush. And I think I'm about there now. So let's go on to the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of any painting, which is to sign it. So I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. On this one, I think I'm gonna sign it in the bottom left. I'm going to use my small brush and I'm going to use black paint. I do my initials, but you could certainly do your first name or the date or a symbol, whatever you feel you want to be your identifying mark. Oh, you could even put it in one of these trees on this one. But anyways, whatever you feel is your identifying mark, that's for your own personal opinion. And I think that's going to do it on this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a novel November moon, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.